Okay.
Hi! I am back. This is Ashley Lewis. Welcome to my channel. I want you to, what did he say? Like and subscribe. Today I have a treat for you. I have Dr. Okoye and Dr. Rogers. These are two amazing people that I went to Meharry Medical College with. We graduated in 2016. And the whole point of this episode, or whatever, is to kind of discuss like the road to medicine and why we chose which field. So I'm a psychiatrist, Dr. Okoye is a urologist, and Dr. Rogers is a general surgeon. Is that correct?
Mhm.
All right. So we are just going to start by just asking them some simple questions about how they got to where they are now. So the first question would be, did you always want to be a doctor? And who kind of guided you and mentored you through the process? So we'll start with Joseph Aquay.
Hey everybody, thanks for having me on this little special, Ashley. Yeah, I mean, in terms of did you always want to be a doctor? That question comes up a lot in interviews and things, and I'll honestly say no. When I started undergrad, I thought I was going to be a pharmacist, mainly because I actually seen pharmacists who looked like me, and I never seen a doctor who looked like me, so it didn't really seem that becoming a physician was an attainable goal. And then after I got a D in chemistry my first year, and I was like, well, I don't think I'm gonna be a pharmacist. So kind of had to reconfigure things. I was studying kinesiology at the time. That was what my degree was in. So we did a lot of stuff about the human body and about like sickness from like a exercise standpoint, nutrition standpoint. But it got me interested in pathology, and after that's when I started thinking about medicine more seriously as a possible career option. Even though I had bad grades in my first year of undergrad, I figured that I'd be able to turn it around hopefully and kind of get on a trajectory. So, in terms of mentors, I had the benefit of doing a mentorship program back in high school. And that's where I got the idea of being a pharmacist, but they also had physicians there. And one of the physicians, his name was Dr. Kerr, was the first like black male doctor I ever met. So he always served as kind of a example for me, and I used to kind of keep in contact with him. And he kind of had the same background in me, same upbringing as me. So he was just basically the idea that I could do it. So I wouldn't say he was a constant mentor throughout undergrad, but the idea is that having seen him gave me the idea that it was possible. And after that, I kind of carried that forward, and it really kind of helped push me through the initially difficult portion of undergrad, and then I started to do a little better, and things started to look up, and I guess the rest was history.
Okay, I have to cut in there because first of all, Joseph Aquay is the smartest guy that I know. So I feel that I have to interview his teachers and figure out what is wrong with them. Compared to you, Joseph Okoye got me through medical school. He did a study thing, whatever you want to call it, top, like most important things for each chapter, for each test, and he got me and many more through medical school. So I need to talk to those teachers talking about whatever. But anyway, now let's go to Dr. Rogers.
Well, I've always wanted to be a doctor, to be honest with you. It started out when I was around 5. My mom was in nursing school at the time, and she was actually a librarian at Meharry Medical College. So I know, crazy. And it was one of those days where she didn't have any babysitters to take care of me, so she took me to work with her. And I was just a nosy little kid. I was just like, Mom, what's this? What's that? Mom, what's this? And the questions that she couldn't answer, she would point me in the direction of like medical students or other physicians to be like, hey, this is what it is, and they would take me under their wing and teach me. And I think from then on, I was like, I want to do this for the rest of my life. And ever since from then on until where I am now, everything what I was doing was geared toward this goal. I wish sometimes that I had like something else because this is really hard. But but I enjoy what I do, and I love my job. I love everything about it. And as far as general surgery is concerned, I honestly never met a Black physician until I hit Meharry Medical College, like at all. And I grew up in like Podunk, Mississippi, so which is like had zero Black people that I remember. Well, at least Black physicians anyway. The first mentor I had was a plastic surgeon back in college, and he took me under his wing, and I saw surgeries with him and the different types, like with reconstructive and with cosmetic. And so I was like, oh, maybe I can do plastic surgery. And I think that was it for me.
All right. Okay. So, did you do a lot of research in high school or college to get to medical school, or did you just kind of, take the MCAT and just go straight to medical school? Start with Ariel.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah,
So, let's see. For some reason in high school, I thought I wanted to get my degree in biochemistry because I figured biology and chemistry, I like them both, and let's put them together. Did not realize they were not the same thing together. It's just not the same thing. And turns out it was like one of the hardest majors in my college. So those, it's wonderful. And I didn't have anybody that like took that same path as I did because I'm the only doctor in my family. And so I had really no guidance. I was kind of just winging it on my own. And I would like listen to other my friends who were actually going through the same thing, who had doctors in their family. And I would try to piggyback off of them. Let's see, I only took the MCAT one time, and I should have taken it more than once, but by the grace of God, I made it into medical school. And Meharry was the only acceptance that I got. So I did research, but that was because I was in honors college because I had to do an honors thesis, and I was like kind of had to. It wasn't like I wanted to. I do not like research, but
okay.
And that's what happened with me.
All right, how about you, Joe?
Yeah. So in terms of kind of a trajectory to med school, it was kind of the same thing. Like I said, I initially wanted to be a pharmacist, and then after I kind of changed my trajectory after the first year. So then it became kind of playing a little bit of catch up because my degree was actually in kinesiology or exercise science. So it wasn't really much in terms of basic sciences. So I knew I'd have to make up a bunch of prerequisite courses. So I'm originally from Toronto, and it's a little different in our system where you don't really need the chemistry, bio, and physics in terms of prerequisites. They just want you to have a degree, and then they want you to take the MCAT and apply. The problem is that med schools in Canada are very competitive because there's not many. I think I only had about 3 options. So the first time I applied, I was pretty limited and just limited my options to Canadian med school. I took the MCAT, did not do well at all, and I didn't get in anywhere. I had also applied to master's programs, didn't get into those. So I was like finished my undergrad degree and kind of sitting in limbo because I didn't have anywhere to go. And at that point, I did much more research into US options as well as Caribbean options. And then I realized I needed to take more courses because I didn't have them. So I went back to almost like a post-bac program, but not quite, for 2 years. And I took the basic prerequisites to where I could at least apply to more schools. And then after I took the MCAT again, and then after applied all over the States, applied all over Canada, applied to the Caribbean. And in terms of the US, I got accepted to a DO school in Michigan and Meharry, and the tuition for the DO school for international students was just ridiculous. So, and then Meharry, I just had a much better experience because I got to go there. I already had mentors before I even started because there were people who just happened to connect with through friends of friends, and they ended up being like my mentors even to this day. So I think that was a major thing for me in how I got here, but it definitely was not a smooth path and did require a little bit of flexibility. In terms of research, didn't really do much research. I didn't do like a master's degree or a thesis course or anything like that. I think I think for some people who enjoy it, it's a good thing, but I don't think it's necessarily 100% required if you're trying to get into med school.
Sounds good. All right. So the next question, now we're in medical school. I mean, I got through because of Joseph. I know that. Just a quick synopsis of some things that helped you make it through, like your support systems, and just like, you know, how we had big sib, little sib, just touch on that a little bit, starting with Joseph.
Yeah, I think you're being modest. You did work quite hard, Ashley. So I just helped a little bit.
No, a lot of things.
No.
A lot of things. You'll be in
but,
medical school if it wasn't for you.
Well, I think the first thing in medical school that was very overwhelming to me, making the transition from undergrad, is just the amount of content and the amount of resources. So, you know, in bio, for example, in undergrad, you'll get one textbook and it said, read from this textbook and study my lectures. Okay, that's fine. But then in med school, for one course like pathology, there's 10 textbooks, there's 10 question banks, there's a bunch of lecture slides, there's different lectures with different styles. So I think that was the hardest thing initially, was figuring out how to narrow down your resources to one or two things that you're really just going to use all the time, because you can have information overload. Because one student will say, hey, I use this book and it's great. Another person will say, I use this book and it's great. And the next thing you know, you have like 5 different textbooks and you're like, where do I start? So I think that was the first thing, is figuring out how to narrow down the content. And a lot of times it's just personal preference. You know, if something works for somebody else, it's not going to necessarily work for you. So I think that initially I was just reading everything and trying to get everything, and I realized I wasn't making any progress. And then after I spoke with the upper year, and he basically gave me this type of advice. He said, listen, you might be different, but these are the 2 resources that I use, and whatever you do, try to find 2 books, maybe like a primary book, a review book, and then a question bank or something you're going to use to do questions. Because I think the main thing about med school is that half of it is content in terms of just getting that basic understanding. The other half is doing questions, because you can have all this content and not know how to apply it doing questions. Right. And then you're just there. It doesn't matter how much you know if you can't get it out into answering questions. It's not going to help. So I think that's probably the main thing, especially for anybody early on. And then just kind of learning that you're going to have to change your study style, because what worked in undergrad won't necessarily work, and you have to become a lot more efficient. Because in undergrad, you had the time to like go to class and listen to a lecture, then go home to listen to the recording and make all these very meticulous notes and then cross-reference with your textbooks. In med school, you got to be much faster. And a lot of times it's just, I think I went to the Meharry, at least, and I'm sure at other med schools they have like academic counseling, and I just kind of went to them. I was like, hey, this is how I study, and what do I need to change? And they basically just like go off your strengths, but they also say, well, this you got to cut out. You're not going to have time to go over every lecture twice or whatever you used to do. And I think that recognizing that early and just taking your lumps initially and figuring out the best way to work is important. And then eventually study groups come into play, but I don't know if they necessarily need to be a thing from day one, because you do have to be a little bit confident in studying yourself and figure out how you like to go through it. And I think that's another thing, that people can get caught up in the idea of suddenly going to study groups, and it can get overwhelming as well initially, because everybody's studying and everybody's doing things, and sometimes you're like intimidated because one person's already went through this much content and you're still on like the first chapter, and you're just like, oh. So I think that it's okay to take a step back and just like learn to study yourself. And then eventually, especially when it got closer to exams, study groups were great. And then as you progress and you kind of figure out the people you work well with, you start to study with them all the time. It doesn't necessarily mean you guys are studying like off each other, but you're just physically holding each other accountable, because like sometimes it just be like, I'm ready to take a break and be lazy, and I look to the next room and the person I came with is still studying. So I'm like, all right, fine, I'll stay and study a little bit longer. And I think that's what it came down to me. And then for me personally, I love teaching as a way of learning. Not everybody is like that, but I think that also helps in terms of teaching and teaching back to each other. But once again, figure out resources, learn to study yourself, and be confident with that first.
All right, Ariel.
Basically everything that Joe said. I personally like study groups, but I don't have to like hear or get this whole like teaching situation. Like as long as I have somebody with me that can keep me accountable and keep me focused, and just somewhere near me that you don't have to be necessarily studying the same thing, but just somebody that's there in your presence. You need to stop slacking off. You need to stop procrastinating. I know what you're doing over there. Don't do it. You know, that type of thing. and to go on those study groups that people are actually talking and conversing. I remember one specific time, it was me, you, Ashley, well, you, it was both of you and Francesca, and there's a lot of other people. And I remember being overwhelmed because they were saying things that I didn't either get to, or is like I didn't know, and so I can't do it, and I left. And I think it got better after that. Also, I started tutoring around, was it third year, and it started helping me with internal medicine and things like that, especially the ones helping the younger years with their courses would help me build upon that foundation that I had to have for the clinical courses. So I think that was helpful.
Okay, and so when we were going through medical school, what helped you guys pick surgery, internal, family? Why did you pick general surgery?
Is what I wanted to do the whole time.
Right, but like,
honestly,
I said, what kind of helped you decide that? And are you going to do fellowship?
So honestly, I went in knowing that I wanted to do surgery, but I also wanted to keep an open mind, thinking like maybe I'd like something else. And with every little clinical rotation I did, I always found something wrong with it. Like I had OB-GYN first. I liked the surgical aspect of it, but I did not like the women and the cattiness. Hated it. Then pediatrics, I loved inpatient, but I hated clinic. And then family was just so much all at the same time, even though it was like a relatively easier course, but it was just too much all at one time. Psych, sorry, Ashley, I don't like talking to people a lot. I do, but I don't.
Yeah, you do.
I do, but you know.
Yeah, anyway. I get it.
And then surgery, it was just, it's like you have the medical aspect of it as well as you get to do something about it. And I loved working with my hands, and I liked the kinetic learning. So I just stuck with surgery.
Okay.
And then I'm contemplating on doing plastic surgery. Still contemplating.
Okay.
We're doing a rotation at the neighboring UC school. So we'll see how that goes. But we'll see.
All right. Sounds good. All right, Joe, what made you pick urology?
Well, I'll be honest, I didn't know what urology was prior to medical school. I thought I was going to be a pediatrician because one of my pediatrician was one of the only African doctors I'd ever met back in Toronto. So she kind of had that idea in my head. And then I worked with a family practice as a medical assistant for a couple of years. So family medicine was also, kind of feeding into that desire to do pediatrics. And then when I got to med school, my third year, when you actually start doing your rotations, you get like a candid exposure to them, not just like being a volunteer or being a worker. And I realized that I didn't enjoy the clinic aspect as much as I thought I would have. And I liked it, but not as much in terms of that bulk of clinic. And I realized that I wanted something to kind of diversify how I felt I wanted to do practice. So, I like procedures. I like small procedures. I did like clinic, but not all clinic. And then after, I was trying to figure out something that would allow me to be involved in all of those. And for general surgery, how it works is that you basically have to choose some specialties of interest to do as part of your rotation outside of general surgery. And I had put some stuff, and I had a third choice, and I was like, oh, no, I'll choose urology. I just saw it on the list. I didn't really know what it was. But I ended up doing that as my subspecialty rotation. I met Dr. Moses, who was at that time appointed by Vanderbilt and Meharry. And he kind of took me under his wing a little bit. He was one of the few Black urologists in the city. And the procedures, I just like the fact that they were short procedures, they were long procedures, and there was such a wide variety. I liked a lot of the endoscopic procedures that we do because they reminded me of video games, which I played quite a bit of, and that was fun. And they did have clinic, but their clinic was a mixture of seeing patients for basic things as well as doing procedures, and you kind of get to build a longitudinal relationship with these patients because a lot of them are cancer patients who will keep seeing you after you treated them. So I think those kind of came together, and with him as a mentor, it definitely kind of pushed me in that direction. And it was kind of interesting because the last thing I thought I was going to do is surgery. I was like, oh, I hate surgery. I hate the idea of standing up all that time. And I'm not good in my hands. And I'm not going to do this and that. And here I am. So I think that it kind of speaks to the fact that you do have to keep an open mind because things change quite rapidly. And you do have to kind of be confident because urology is competitive, and I wasn't sure if I'd be able to match into it. But you know, I had a good
Mm.
mentor. I mean,
Right
I,
there.
I applied for something else as a backup just in case, but
Yeah,
yeah.
right, okay.
Okay, guys, we have 7 minutes. So
Okay.
okay.
Okay. All
I'm gonna ask you guys to talk to the person that thinks they cannot do it. What do you wish you heard when you were younger, that you weren't hearing, but you made it here anyway? So y'all have like a minute apiece because I don't want it to cut us off. I when I do this, go to the next person.
right. Okay.
Start, Ariel.
Okay. To the person who feel like they can't do it, I grew up not necessarily like knowing what to do or how to do it. Also, I had some mishaps along the way where I didn't make it the way I wanted to, and it's okay. It is definitely okay to feel like, you know, you failed, but as long as you get back up again, that's all that matters. Don't stay down. Just keep moving and keep going forward. That's it.
Sounds great. That's perfect. Joe?
I think kind of echoing what she says, a lot of time you are going to have some failures. And if you let your failure define you, you can definitely, you know, limit your opportunities. So I think that a lot of things didn't go as I planned. Immediately after undergrad, I was working as a janitor and I didn't see a path to medical school. But the idea is that you have to remember that the failures are just part of your journey. And at the end of the day, you'll be able to tell a story to somebody much like this to encourage them. So remember that. And I think that's the key thing I can tell people. Just hold on to your goal despite the journey to get there.
All right. So this is Dr. Okoye and Dr. Rogers. Joe and Ariel, we've been studying for years and years and years, but we haven't seen each other in a few years, but it doesn't matter because what we went through, we will always be family. Once we get like the feedback from the channel, I will have them back on. We will talk more like, is this field everything that you wanted it to be, or do you wish that you had some knowledge and pick something different? So thank you much. Tune into my channel, like, subscribe. I don't know, you know, I'm learning. This day 3, guys. All right, bye. Like, subscribe. I kind of stopped the recording.